Welcome back to On Texas Football. I'm Jeff Howe, joined by Gerry Hamilton and CJ Vogel. It's time for State of the Program, and we'd like to thank Adam Lowy and the Lowy Law Firm for their sponsorship of On Texas Football and for State of the Program. If you've been injured in a car wreck, truck wreck, automobile accident of any kind, from an 18-wheeler to an ATV, and you think you might be due compensation, then reach out to Adam Lowy and the Lowy Law Firm at loweylawfirm.com. Adam and his group will give you a free, no strings attached consultation. Again, that's loweylawfirm.com. And thanks to Adam and the Lowy Law Firm for their sponsorship and support of On Texas Football. Guys, Steve Sarkisian press conference on Tuesday. CJ and I broke that down on the live, but Gerry, I want to get your thoughts. I want to start with this, the transfer portal. It opens next week. Texas has a couple of things we know they're going. We've been talking about we think they're going to go in these directions, but Sark mentioned those three positions specifically: wide receiver, defensive line, tight end. Gerry, I want to ask you this. Which one of those intrigues you the most?
Intrigues me the most is D-line, because you never really know if there's those high-end guys that are going to be in the portal, right? Is there somebody that's going to jump in the portal that's a disruptor? They don't need over-the-ball players. They're good there. That's a disruptor. And how good is that guy? Because if there's only one or two of those guys, they're very leveraged. They have all the leverage. It's a leverage recruitment from an NIL perspective. So those can get really big. So D-line intrigues me the most, just because there's not as many of those guys in the portal, and the ones that are in the portal that are really good, you got to be willing to go sky high for those guys.
Absolutely. CJ, I want to flip it on offense, and let's look at wide receiver and tight end. Which do you think is the more pressing need for Texas in the portal?
Yeah, to me, it's tight end. It's a complete unknown at tight end, right? We talk about the promise and, the hope that Jordan Washington becomes the guy, and what Nick Townsend might bring, and how Spencer Shannon's physique and stature as a 6'7" tight end can help that run game. But we don't know. We haven't seen that, right? You haven't seen it in action yet. We've seen Ryan Wingo. We've seen DeAndre Moore. They're pretty good wide receivers. In practice, we were there for day one. We know that Jamie French looks good. We've heard the reviews of a Parker Livingstone. So right now, with Jordan Washington not participating in the spring, tight end is a big question mark. And I know that Sarkisian values that tight end spot. We've seen it in 3 straight years, really. That tight end spot has been breaking record after record after record. They value that position. Now, would that be the case with Arch Manning? We'll have to wait and see. But we know that they bridge the run game with the pass game. And to get an experienced guy, to get a guy that's been out there and done that, to me, that's huge for this offense. So that's where my focus is, specifically when the portal opens up in a week.
My only qualification, guys, for a receiver, Gerry, you hit it on the head, and Sark even mentioned this. They're not going to take numbers just to take numbers. They're not interested in depth pieces at this point. They want somebody that's going to upgrade the talent level on their roster. If you can do that at wide receiver and get somebody that's got, at the very least, punt return experience, I think it's easier to find a kickoff returner. But if you can find somebody with punt return experience, you should be markedly better on special teams, Gerry, because Texas has to be – you got to figure – your defense was elite last year, and even if it's elite, it might take a step back this year. And with a first-year starting quarterback and all the things changing on offense, we can expect some growing pains at some point. Special teams has got to help Texas win football games this year.
No, I think so. I agree with what you're saying, because the return game is kind of a question mark right now. And look, Texas has talented athletes. They're going to figure it out. But to your point, if there's somebody in that jumps in the portal that is very good in both, I think that's going to intrigue Steve Sarkisian quite a bit. And I'll take it a step further. You got Arch Manning for 2 years starting. Let's be real. He's not leaving after a year. All those reports that'll be out, it's all crap. So you want to weaponize him the best you can for these 2 years, because you only get one Arch Manning, and unless you get Marshall Manning, you're only getting one Manning at Texas. So you got to get you got to push all your chips to the table offensively, and with the team in the 2 years you have it, to have Arch Manning in Austin. So I totally agree. I think that receiver too could go one of two ways. Either what you're talking about, Jeff, or a bigger wide receiver that will go snatch the 50-50 ball and turn it into 80-20. That has versatility. That means that it has to be an X outside receiver that has versatility doing that.
Absolutely. That's a good thing, Jerry. And I hadn't really thought about that because you figure of the guys in the program right now, Ryan Wingo is probably best suited to do that. But, I think of a guy, Colin Johnson and Lil Jordan Humphrey were great at that a couple of years ago. I mean, we talk about 50-50 balls, but with those guys, it was 65-35, 70-30 type balls that Sam Ehlinger was throwing up to those guys. And actually, if you look at the numbers, I know it can get kind of skewed. I don't think Texas had a play in 2018. I don't think they had an offensive play go for more than 50 yards. But if you look at just the explosive plays, the 20-plus, Texas was one of the most explosive offenses in the country in 18. And that was with not utilizing Devin Duvernay's speed probably the way they should have. But that was mostly with throwing up those 70-30 balls to Humphrey and Colin Johnson that Sam Ehlinger got by with. CJ, I want to stick with the Sark press conference. And I don't think we talked enough about this, and I don't think it's getting enough run. We figured there was going to be some changes in the secondary with Dwayne Aquino, Mark Orfe coming in, and Kenoto Hudson getting promoted. But Jalen Gilbo going out to corner, I know there was a lot at the press conference on Tuesday, but Jalen Gilbo moving out to corner, I don't think is something that got talked enough about. Sark mentioned Kobe Black specifically. He mentioned Warren Roberson's had a really good spring. Ryan Niblett working at that star position. CJ, there's just a lot of moving parts in the secondary right now and some battles that I think are going to go past spring ball. I think you're going to go through summer and even camp before some of this stuff gets sorted out.
Yeah, all about finding that guy opposite of Manny Muhammad, right? I've kind of mentioned this in the past, right? I kind of look at these spring ball position battles as you're either in pencil, very likely written into a spot, or you're in pen. And there aren't many guys in pen. Of course, you got your Colin Simmonses, your Anthony Hills. I think Manny Muhammad is one of those guys. And I know that there was a rocky end of the season last year. I'm not worried about that at all for 2025. He's in pen. He is your starter at one side. Now, who joins him? And that position opposite of Muhammad is very tight, right? You got Jalen Gilbo, who's played a lot of football at the Star, making that same move out wide that we saw Jahdae Barron make. But, of course, Kobe Black played some meaningful snaps on the road at Vanderbilt, on the road at Arkansas. They trusted him in some third quarter situations to go guard an Andrew Armstrong and to make sure that he is battle tested as a freshman. But then you're hearing about Warren Roberson, who Sark said had an elite, an excellent spring ball so far. That's a word that we don't hear Sarkisian use very often. And so to hear that about a third-year guy who we haven't really seen a lot of at the cornerback spot, encouraging. Of course, he mentioned Kobe Black's had a good spring as well, but then there's a Santana Wilson. Then there's a Cade Phillips. All of these guys are making noise in their own right. How can they make things interesting? So, yeah, Jeff, absolutely. In terms of a position that is going to linger all the way into this fall camp when it comes to finding what positions work, which guys mesh well with one another, how did they communicate with the safeties? It's going to take a while to find that rotation and which guys truly stand up the most. But fortunately, yet plenty of opportunities and bodies to figure out who they might be.
Gerry, I want to stay in the secondary real quick because one thing Sark mentioned when he was talking about the secondary I think is worth repeating. Rod and I talked about this on Football Theory. Sark has been really big on wanting to play more man coverage, and he mentioned some of the newer guys. We'll throw Santana Wilson in there because he was a scout team guy last year while redshirting. But you look at Santana Wilson, Cade Phillips, Grayson Littleton, some of the new bodies in the secondary, specifically at corner. Jerry, Sark's really excited about these guys. I think, to what CJ was just mentioning, I think he's going to play the long game because he wants to see if some of these guys can develop quickly, because he wants to be a team that just can really get after you in man coverage on the outside. And I think he really likes at least the body types and the skill sets, the potential that some of these new corners have. Yeah,
the spring portal's very easy for fans and for all of us. If they don't go in the portal when at a position where they have youth, then they really like their youth. I mean, it's a pretty simple formula, right? You only go in the portal because there's depth in numbers at corner. I mean, even when you get down to Cade Phillips and Caleb Chester, talented kids, freshmen. But if you don't look in the portal, that means you really like what you have. Because, again, like I always say, there's really not an excuse to be an inexperienced team if you're a blue blood. And by inexperienced, I mean, Jordan Washington was on campus for a year. The offensive lineman, Neto's been in the program for 3 years now. So to me, it's more than inexperience is like having a ton of freshmen out there that have never played before. That's what I'm talking about. But if you don't go into the portal at a position in the spring, you really like your young guys. I remember that on the offensive line too.
Speaking of the offensive line, Gerry, I've beaten CJ over the head with it, so I'll beat you over the head with it for a little bit. Some guys we've talked about at ontexasfootball.com and here on the channel, there are 3 reserve offensive linemen, and I use that term loosely because there's a lot of competition right now. We've talked a lot about Andre Kojo, we've talked a lot about Nate Kibble, and we talked a lot about Nick Brooks. And Gerry, all 3 of those guys got mentioned specifically by name by Sark on Tuesday. Man, I don't take for granted, as somebody who loves the offensive line, I don't take for granted having good depth, because trust me, I've seen what it's been like around here when there hadn't been depth or talent, and it's not pretty. So, Gerry, I love the fact that those 3 young guys that we talked about, and even though Kojo's been here for a minute, by age, he's still young, so I'll throw him in the young category. Gerry, I love the fact that these guys are all making noise right now.
And it's also when you look at Kojo, I mean, look, he was 16 years and 11 months when he reported to Texas. I think he turned 17 like 4 or 5 days after he reported, right? It's also a stick-to-itiveness part of it too, and developing and trusting your development. I mean, Kojo and Neto's been in the program a year longer, but these guys are now getting to the point where they've had time to develop both technically and physically. And in Kojo, it's a lot of physical development because he was such a young, big body. I mean, it's, graduating from high school at 16 in 10 months as a December graduate. I mean, that's a lot to put on a big dude's plate when you're coming into college. It's going to take time. So it's great that he stuck it out, because as CJ knows, there was some early, would he stay after year 1? There was some of those chatter behind the scenes. Oh, is he going to transfer to TCU or something? He stuck with it. And I think he's seeing the rewards of sticking with it. He's in a real competition. He's building himself a future at Texas. Whether he wins the job or not, injuries happen. You're going to play. You're always a play away. And then in the case of Nick Brooks, guys, I'll get to Nate Kibble next, but I saw Nick Brooks as a senior, and I knew how good that move to Grayson was going to be for him because of how he was tested every single day in practice by Power 4 guys, probably somebody that'll play in the NFL one day off of that group of players that Grayson had at one state. But he also lost 20 plus pounds. He also got in better shape. And when you have success against other Power 4 guys in practice and then in the games, it carries over to games, and you're losing weight, you gain confidence. And I think that kid needed to gain confidence and real belief in himself because he's really talented. And then that's carried over to Texas. And what's so impressive about Nick Brooks for me, guys, he started out as the number 2 left tackle the first day of spring football. But the fact that he's also in the mix at right tackle means he can switch up technique. He can switch up his feet and still perform because it's a different stance. It's a different peripheral out of left eye versus right eye. It's totally different playing left tackle and right tackle. And the fact that he's able to do that early on speaks really well for his future at Texas and probably in the NFL if he stays healthy. And then with Nate Kibble, he's one of the 3 guys that I'd heard. CJ, I think we'd all heard it had really good redshirt years. And it was Nate Kibble, and it was Zena, and it was Santana Wilson. That doesn't mean any of them are going to start this year, but it means that Texas really liked what they saw in those guys during a redshirt year. The case of Nate Kibble, if there had been a long-term injury to a right guard last year, whether that be DJ Campbell or Cole Hudson, they were going to play Nate Kibble. That means you're having a hell of a redshirt year. So, again, does that mean he's ready to be a starter right now? Well, Neto's there and DJ Campbell's there. Doesn't mean he can be the 3rd guard and get reps. I think it does mean that. But the depth of the offensive line is starting to really show at Texas through evaluation and development. And the key to development is guys sticking around long enough for that development to happen.
CJ, I'll give you 1 or 2 options here, man. Whichever one you don't go with, Gerry gets the other one, so choose wisely. You want to talk about Arch Manning's swag and leadership? You want to talk about Christian Clark's injury recovery? Whichever one you want, take it, and Gerry gets the other one.
Yeah, give me Arch, because that's where everybody's going to listen, right? No, I'm kidding. But for Christian Clark, tremendous story there as well. For Arch, it's fun to hear about the competitiveness, the chirping, kind of that smack talk. We likened it a little bit on the winning drive on Monday. It's been a minute since you've heard of a Texas quarterback having that competitive edge, right? You know, a guy that's going to go out there, beat you, and then let you know that he beat you. And Arch brings that a little bit. Of course, it helps coming in the same class as Anthony Hill, being a guy that's been around Anthony Hill for so long, to give him a little finger point every now and then and say, hey, we got you there. That's going to drive the competitiveness. That's going to drive these guys in practice to say, hey, I don't want to be, you know, kind of teased. I don't want to be a guy that got showed up on the practice field. I'm supposed to be a leader. I'm supposed to be a captain for my guys in my room. If that guy's telling me that, you know, he's coming out here to bust my ass every day, I don't like that. But it's going to make sure that he brings it every single day, and that defensive side of the ball brings it every single day. So to hear Steve Sarkisian say, hey, you know what? It's bringing the best out of the offense, and Arch is finding ways to get more out of the defense as a result. That's tremendous because, again, it's a very youthful team. There's not a lot of experience at a lot of key positions. But if you're finding talented players going against talented players in high pressure situations where, you know you're going to be kind of talked about, if you don't get the job done, that's great. Great way to, for iron to sharpen iron there. And Arch Manning leading the way. That's something that Texas, again, hasn't really had at the quarterback spot in terms of that competitive in-your-face mentality since Sam Ehlinger, really.
Gerry, I'm glad you get to talk about Christian Clark because I love talking about injuries with you, because back in our ESPN team site days, one of the 50 iterations where ESPN's tried to cover recruiting, I remember that class of 2010. Texas took Taylor Bible, and I was excited about Taylor Bible, and you told me to pump the brakes, and I'm like, why, Gerry? He looks like a great defensive tackle. And you were quick to remind me, a defensive tackle that's had multiple shoulder surgeries and hasn't had an offseason program, I'm going to be hesitant on. And ever since then, Gerry, I've been cognizant of a guy's injury history. What is the injury? How's the recovery? How's everything going? We've heard of fast healers, Gerry, but Sark even said, I don't even know what ahead of schedule is for Christian Clark, because it's astonishing that I don't care if it's a partial tear, hairline tear, whatever, a running back to have an Achilles injury and to be after it this soon after, I don't think I've ever heard of anything like this.
Yeah, no, it's pretty amazing. So one, he's a fast healer physically, and he's even a faster healer mentally. And look, there's nothing that impresses your head coach and a college staff or a coaching staff on any level more than when a guy not only fights through adversity, but busts the door down through adversity, right? I mean, that's how a guy becomes a leader in a program, by the way, a leader of a room. That's something similar that Roschon Johnson would have done. And Roschon Johnson did it in a much smaller scale. Remember when everybody thought he broke his ankle? Then he was out there playing the next week? Okay, same thing, right? That's how you become a leader. That's how you gain the ultimate respect of your teammates and your coaching staff. So one, Christian Clark's already done that. But just the fact that he's back there, Bobby, CJ, all of us talked about it. Jeff, you too, that he was cutting full speed that first spring practice. I was kind of taken aback. That's just not what I expected to see.
It was amazing.
So that you can only do that if you're stronger mentally than even you are physically. That's the only way it can happen. So he is a fearless guy, and he totally understands that injuries are part of the game, but the fact that injuries are part of the game is not going to limit him in the game. Yeah. And that's the whole key. And the fact that he's out there now pushing Jarrett Gibson and getting some of those second team reps from time to time says a lot about Christian Clark mentally. And guys like that can be, you know what? That's who you want to hand the ball off to on second and goal from the one.
Gerry, there's I think about running backs and the Achilles and the two, because they're Texas guys. Jonathan Gray was never really the same after his. Deontay Foreman somehow, man, his NFL career looked dead in the water. As of this past season, he's still playing in the National Football League and making money doing this. So, like I said, the same injury, it's a devastating injury. Some guys just recover differently, but props to Christian Clark. Because like I said, I've never heard of, 6-7 months from an Achilles injury and you're back going at it. It's unreal.
Jeff, just think about what you just weaved into. Jonathan Gray had multiple shoulder surgeries coming out of high school.
I like that. Do you like that Taylor Bible blast from the past too?
I did.
I did. It's only the big time ones that were.
And what did Jonathan Gray never do? Ran through contact. Well,
yeah.
What happens when you have both shoulders cut on in high school?
Yeah, watch those shoulder surgeries, ladies and gentlemen, when you're talking about your prospects. We'll talk about some other things going on the 40 acres, but one more time, big thanks to Adam Lowy and the Lowy Law Firm for sponsoring this edition of State of the Program. If you've been injured in a car or truck wreck, automobile accident of any kind, from an 18-wheeler to an ATV, and you think you might be due compensation, then reach out to Adam Lowy and the Lowy Law Firm at loweylawfirm.com. Adam and his group will give you a free, no-strings-attached consultation. Again, that's loweylawfirm.com, and we thank Adam and the Lowy Law Firm for their sponsorship and support of On Texas Football. Guys, let's go on and talk some hoops. And, Gerry, as we look at Sean Miller putting together this roster, they've made some moves in the portal. They've started reaching out to guys in the 2026 class. Where are things right now with Sean Miller and his staff putting together a roster?
Well, so they essentially have 3 scholarships left, 13 scholarships. They have 10 guys on the roster, right? That 11th spot, Texas still leads for Lucina Traore, the 6'10", 250-pound, 245-pound big man that went from Long Beach State to Xavier, got hurt last year in preseason practice, and was probably the reason Xavier wasn't a Sweet 16 team or better this past season in Sean Miller's last season there. I think Texas leads pretty big for him. So let's just say they closed that out and he's number 11. They have, in short amount of time, Sean Miller's brought in 6'7" Cam Hyde, who's very athletic, 6'8" Dylan Swain, who I think will be a first-round draft pick one day, 7-footer Matas, I won't pronounce his last name right, who I think in 2 years will be on NBA mock drafts as well, who is the AAC freshman of the year at FAU. And if he gets Traore, 6'10" Traore. He saw – Texas fans for years have clamored for size. Well, this is going to be the biggest roster you've seen at Texas in your lifetime. But that also means there's one key need left. And they're already being put in the top, way too early top 25s, by the way. They were in ESPN, I think CBS. Both had them like 23, 24. And I think they're worthy of that. If they hit this last combo guard spot, and I think this could be a portal player, or I think it could be an international player. Now, those are tricky nowadays because of the pass-through income and the visas. But because it's not, Zach Edey went through that with the NIL issues at Purdue being from Canada. So it's a little trickier. But if they knock this last combo guard spot out, they're going to be sitting there as a top 20 team in year one, while also having some younger guys to build with who are multi-year guys. We'll see if Dylan Swain ends up being a 2-year guy. Cam Hyde should be a 2-year guy. Matas should be a 2-year guy. You have your 3 young bigs to develop those guys behind some experienced players, Jamie Vinson, Nick Cody, and the freshman John Clark. So I really like what Sean Miller is doing. I love the international recruiting part of this. And that 13th scholarship, that could be maybe a young guard to develop, knowing he's not going to come in and play. Maybe another international guy. We'll see. But I think Sean Miller's done a really good job in a short amount of time. If he knocks out this last combo guard spot, and it's somebody that I think is a really good player, I'm not going to hesitate to say that Sean Miller may have a top 20 level team in year one. I think he's the player retention. Those guys are going to be better under him. They're a great player development program. Tremont Mark and Jordan Pope will have something else unlocked offensively. And then you look at a guy like Dalen Swain, a 6'8" versatile guy you can play 4 out, 1 in with. He can handle the ball. He can be an offense initiator from his spot too. I think Sean Miller's going to build really good rosters at Texas. What does that mean? Will he get to a Final Four? What all that everybody wants to talk about? I don't have that answer. I do think he's going to be knocking on the door at Texas in time.
I keep going back to it, Gerry. We talk about the importance of multi-year guys, and you go back and look at Chris Beard's first roster. That roster that ended up almost making the second weekend. But Timmy Allen, Marcus Carr, Dylan Dessou, Christian Bishop.
Yeah,
all of those guys came back for another year, and you added Tyrese Hunter to that mix. That gave you a Final Four. Oh, and Jabari Rice, by the way, out of the portal, which was another great add. You had a Final Four caliber roster. The backbone of that team was the 2-year guys, the multi-year guys you took on that first team. Guys,
just to add to that real quick, this past championship game, Florida and Houston, the first one since '89 that didn't see a single freshman touch the floor. So age, experience in college basketball, it makes a world of difference.
Yeah, and to that point, CJ, if you go through Florida real quick, they're starting 5. Walter Clayton, nobody wanted him out of high school. Oh, except Rick Pitino at Iona, by the way, out of Lake Wells. but a guy that developed into a lead guard. Will Richard went to Belmont, wasn't highly recruited out of high school, transferred in 3 years at Florida. Martin, the other guard, went to FAU, played on a Final Four team, but went to FAU as a lightly recruited guy, then to Florida. Alex Condon was NBA Global out of Australia. Then Chinalu was a 4-star guy, but he came from Washington State. So Florida just won a national title, and they didn't do it with the most hyped up players. Far from it, in fact. But what they did was they put a roster together that all fit really well together and had enough leadership in there. The Walter Clayton was just a cold-blooded guy, but they built a tremendous roster. And that's really going to be the key in college basketball. To CJ's point is, if you have a special freshman, if Austin Gooseby signs with Texas in a couple of years, he's going to be really good. But you have to put the right experience around those guys. And that's what John Shire is going to do because he continues to recruit these big-time guys. Experience got them against U of H. Lack of it.
Gerry, to that point, I think you can even go back over 20 years and look at the kind of the watershed moment of the Rick Barnes era. Look at that Final Four team. You had one special player in TJ Ford, a generational talent. Look at all the experience that was around him. Brandon Mouton, Brian Boddicker, Royale Ivy, James Thomas, guys that fit well into a team concept. Everybody did their role. Everybody did their part, did their job. And you had the one guy who could take over in crunch time, which, Gerry, I don't mean to go down, memory road here, but the one game that I'll never forget from that Final Four year was the game where they beat Kelvin Sampson coached OU team in Norman. That was a huge win, and the experience kept them in it. And then you had your one special player, TJ Ford, take over in crunch time.
Yeah. Man, tell Coach Barnes, hey, get Brodericker back in the game. Yes, absolutely. But that's part of it too. That's your special player. That sometimes those special players can help a coach as much as a coach can help a player. That's just the reality. I mean, Walter Clayton probably inserted a lot of belief into Coach Golden in a weird way, right? There's probably some point that Golden, you'll hear a story about during the season where Walter Clayton patted him on the butt and said, dude, I got this. Don't worry about it. Keep these guys in the game and let me play off of them. That's what has to happen on teams like that. I mean, and you always hear about it, man. I mean, you heard about it with Vince, right? When he was at Texas and getting guys into the offseason right after the Michigan game. Who wants to win a national championship? You're going to have TJ had that in him, right? And that's the biggest thing when you come into a program, and this is what Sean Miller's going to have to do. Who's going to be that guy for him? Yeah. And I'm not saying he's going to go to a Final Four or anything that in year one. I'm talking as he builds that program, finding that key player that can be the difference, to be your voice when you can't be the voice, and can carry belief of all others with you. It matters.
100%. Shout out to Vic Schaefer and the women's basketball team. They get to a Final Four. He's starting to put this roster back together. Rory Harmon announced right before we started recording this episode that she's coming back. We kind of saw this coming. We've been talking about it at ontexasfootball.com. Guys, you got to feel good about an experienced point guard coming back for another year. I know there's still a lot of moving parts with this roster, but Rory Harmon coming back with Brianna Preston, who had a really good freshman year, should be a pretty solid backcourt for Texas in the 25-26 season.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how that roster is constructed. Of course, Texas fans are clamoring for more shooting, but hey, you got a really solid core right now of what we saw of Jordan Lee, what we know of Madison Booker. And then you mentioned the ball handling. Look, that matters just as much on that side of the ball, right? You got to be able to take care of the rock. And Texas got bit each time that they played South Carolina. That pressure up front on the ball, that stymied the offense quite a bit, right? On top of not getting clean looks, Texas has to be able to generate more shooting, more clear looks as well, to bring Rory Harmon back, who does a lot of the dirty work as well, right? There are nights where she has 3 points, but 3 steals and a block, right? And which is pretty remarkable for her size. But point being, she does a lot of the dirty work, and she's a great ball handler, someone who, again, knows the system in and out, and will be someone that Texas takes or at least takes Texas to that same level, if not a higher level next year.
Yeah, I think you'll see more of Harmon and Bree Preston on the court together. Assuming everybody stays on the roster that's currently on the roster, I think you'll see more of them together to speed things up at times for Texas.
Let's finish with some baseball. CJ, Texas got the sweep over Georgia over the weekend and then got a run rule victory over Houston Christian on Tuesday. Maybe the only disappointing thing was Jonah Williams getting hit during his pinch hit, but hey, you can't win them all. CJ, just your thoughts on baseball right now as they get ready to go to Lexington for a 3-game series against Kentucky.
Yeah, best start for a Texas baseball team since 2004. You got to be pleased with the pitching. Finally, they scratched the 2-game Tuesday night losing skid, and the bats came alive in the second inning last night. But all in all, you got to be thrilled, right? Each big test that you've faced this year, whether it be in Vegas, whether it be those preseason tournaments, whether it be LSU at home or Georgia at home, you've taken care of them all, right? And that's very important early on to get the confidence knowing no team is going to be bigger than the University of Texas when it comes to baseball. No situation is going to be bigger than what they might face in the SEC tournament or regional or super if they get that far. Point being, a lot of confidence is being played right now, and they're doing this without a Max Ballou or an Adrian Rodriguez, two of the focal points in the lineup. So to get that confidence in some of those guys down the lineup, right? Jaquay Stewart's coming alive. We're finally seeing some life out of Easton Winfield, and Tommy Farmer had a big clutch double last night with the bases loaded. How can they continue to generate runs lower in the lineup when you see now Max Ballou and Adrian Rodriguez return? Oh, and Will Gasparino over the last 2 weeks, Jeff, might be the hottest hitter in baseball.
Talking about spring football, Sark's getting it done. Sean Miller building a roster. Vic Schaefer just went to a Final Four. Schloss has the baseball team ranked number 2 in the country. Mike White's got softball ranked number 1. Things are great on the 40 right now. Gerry, I'll give you the last word. We talked about this on the recruiting breakdown this week, but a massive weekend for Texas and for Sark on the football unofficial visitor front. You've got John Turntine coming in, KJ Edwards coming in. Gerry, real quick, you get the last word on the recruiting weekend.
Yeah, look, I think we'll add more names to that. I think there'll be some out-of-state kids come in. Texas is working through this first half of the week to get some of those kids in. We'll see. Look, Sark, they don't host many official visitors early on, so we'll see if they can get a couple of big names from out of state on campus unofficially, along with the guys that we have talked about and we know now that the list is already on ontexasfootball.com. I expect the list to grow. Turntine, KJ Edwards, the corner Samari Matthews, Howard Hayward out of Edna Carr. LSU just offered yesterday, by the way. So they're making their move on an in-state kid from Edna Carr High School. Then 3D linemen, Damari Simeon, Corey Wells out of Petal, Mississippi, James Johnson out of Miami Northwestern, used to be North Fort Myers. There will be more guys come in. There will be some 2027s as well. Obviously, we think there's going to be names added to this list, and we think there could be a couple of big names come in here in the next 48 hours.
Ooh.
All right, and we'll be tracking it all here on the channel and over at ontexasfootball.com. Don't forget the promo code OTFOG, get you 1 year of access at ontexasfootball.com for $49.95 with the unofficial visits this weekend, June official visits, and we'll be at camp before you know it. You don't want to miss anything, so get over there right now. Plus, all the spring sports we've been talking about. We talked plenty of basketball. We've got it all covered for you at ontexasfootball.com. It's a great time to be a Longhorn fan, so jump right in. Get over to OTF and enjoy. Gerry, CJ, thank you both for the time and the knowledge. Thank you to Adam Lowy and the Lowy Law Firm for sponsoring this edition of State of the Program, and thank you, everybody, for tuning in. So for Gerry, for CJ, I'm Jeff Howe, and until next time, hook 'em.